I'm Andrea, a passionate DEI advocate and consultant on a mission. Join me in each episode as we celebrate diversity, ignite conversations, and craft workplaces and educational institutions where everyone thrives. This podcast is my commitment to making a meaningful impact on the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So are you ready? Let's get Diversifused. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Get Diversifused podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Horton-Mericli, founder of Diversifuse Consulting and a passionate DEI advocate and ally. In today's episode, we will discuss turning setbacks into strengths, navigating DEI challenges with resilience, with our guest speaker, Jessica Pettitt, who goes by Jess. I'll be calling her Jess in the podcast. Jess isn't a chef by any stretch of the imagination, but similar in that a true chef has a secret ingredient that they often leave out of a recipe, like all of our mothers, on purpose and at a dash when no one is looking, that pulls from past experiences and is exactly what is needed to really elevate a dish. By pulling from a variety of consulting clients, direct crisis management experiences, multitudes of different jobs along the way, and experience on stage as a stand-up comic, trainer, and now keynote speaker, Jess can elevate conversations. It is through Jess's work in student affairs as a college administrator in South Carolina, Oregon, New York, and Arizona that she realized her love for the conversations across differences. As a Social Justice Training Institute alumna, returned Peace Corps volunteer, thank you, and a certified speaking professional, Jessica has taken the typical diversity talks to the next level of social justice conversations, examining privilege, oppression, entitlement, and our collective responsibility to making change while connecting difficult topics with employee retention, crisis management, and increasing innovation and profits. Jessica blends politics, humor, identity, and local flair with big city passion and energy through direct, individualized, and interactive conversations. Her workshops, seminars, and keynotes don't just leave participants invigorated, but inspired and motivated to follow through with action to create change. Having traveled and lived in a variety of communities and environments all over the world, Jessica uses her take on life to lead participants through a safe but confrontational process of examination, self-reflection, and open dialogue, as challenging as it is rewarding. Responses to Jessica's programs are overwhelmingly positive and include comments ranging from, "This was awful, I never had to think so hard while laughing," to, "I can't believe my boss brought her. Thanks for actually treating us like adults," to, "She answered all of my questions knowledgeably and without making me feel dumb for asking." With her attention now turning to larger associations and corporate leadership, Jessica is pulling from the past 15 years of direct experience to lead teams to try instead of avoiding a stretch. It is in this trying that clients uncover a deeper sense of belonging, resourcefulness, collaboration opportunities, and reignite their creativity and innovation ideation. Learning, feeling, and being good enough now allows for teams to do the best they can with what they have and persist long into the future, no matter the crisis, topic, or challenge. Graduating from the University of South Carolina with a master's in education in higher education administration with an emphasis in crisis management, Jessica pulls together lessons from teaching history and English in the classroom, as well as those from the stand-up comedy stages of New York City, to bring real and actionable results to meeting rooms and board tables. She is well published, including multiple online training courses, curriculum guides, and two books soon, actually 2 books now, a second edition, that makes the abstractable actionable. So welcome, Jess, to the Get Diversifused podcast. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Absolutely. It's funny listening to the long form introduction because one, I feel old.
You're not, we're about the same age, so you're not old.
I appreciate that. I just turned 50, so that's kind of settling into me. So
I hear you. But so listeners, I had the option of a short bio and a long bio, and I chose a long bio because there was so much wonderful information in there, although I did love the Jess's short bio. But I just wanted to give you more of an idea of all the experience that Jess has and all the initiatives and trainings that through a humorous approach just brings to organizations and individuals. So I just wanted to let you all know that. So that's why I chose the long bio.
Absolutely. It's interesting, I think, because I mean, you are a diversity expert as well, consultant, speaker, etc. Hire Andrea. And what I think is interesting, right, is that if you're able to pull from a number of different corners of your personal and professional life, it just makes it that much easier to facilitate conversations with other human beings.
Yeah.
So the casserole, as I call the long bio, in some ways is important because I've been in a lot of places. I've been the most liberal person in the room. I've been the most conservative person in the room. And those are really helpful perspectives to be able to be empathetic through tough conversations. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I definitely agree with the storytelling component being very impactful and relatable. You don't know how many people it's actually going to touch in the audience or in the workshop of your attendees, because there's so many things that aren't talked about in workplaces and educational institutions and the community at large that we often feel we're alone. And many people in society are hesitant to bring certain topics up, and humor, talking about them through a humorous approach, just kind of brings tensions down. And because having those uncomfortable conversations is uncomfortable, and it can, some people just get sweaty and they don't like it. And bringing humor in really puts people at ease and it increases, maybe not everybody, but most people at ease. And it also opens up their minds to actually listening to you and not just going to, this is another workshop and on the phone, and it draws their attention. And, laughter, to me, I've always said this, laughter is the best medicine. And those that are happy are usually also the healthier ones too. They live a longer life.
Yeah. I like to think of it as an invitation. So I think what the words you just said made me think of the words relatable and humor. If it's the great equalizer and you're relatable, then you're able to foster an invitation or a culture of invitation to people who don't often feel like they're allowed to be in these conversations. So that's how I've had great success working primarily with more conservative people or folks who feel really left out of kind of this social justice warrior movement. And for lack of better words, I think us pinko commie liberals have done a lot of harm in disinviting the very people that we would like to be at the table. So
yeah, exactly. The two extremes in the room, it just brings them together. So I go. So even though I read your long bio, I would still love for you to tell our listeners about you and how you went from stand-up comic to actually working in colleges to stand-up comic to doing what you do now with DEI initiatives.
Yeah, I mean, the real answer is that I often am doing way more than one thing at a time, right? So I worked as a college administrator as a profession, primarily representing or trying to increase services to marginalized students, faculty, and staff.
Oh, it's wonderful.
So I was the person on the campus who would point out how the campus was not serving marginalized students, faculty, and staff, which did not make me very popular. So I often got fired, and then I'd go get another job and do the same thing. I'd get fired, do the same thing, get fired, do the same thing. So the third time I got fired, I got a severance package. And I also had grown up a little bit, right? And realized there is a common denominator in getting fired all those times. So I used my time with my severance package to actually launch this business in case I kept getting fired again. I got another job, and technically I didn't get fired. I quit, but I probably would have gotten fired if I'd stayed there longer. So that's kind of how I professionally trajectory it worked, right? But the work I was doing on college campuses was mediation, facilitation, training, keynoting, emceeing. We just didn't call it that because it was just my right. So I was building up those skills. While I was at NYU in New York, I had been relatively estranged from my father for about 10 years after my mother died. And so when my dad finally died, my therapist at the time recommended doing something that kind of followed I'm a daddy's girl, right? So like what was the biggest lesson I got from my dad? And that was live your life as if you're not if you weren't scared of anything, how would you live your life?
Oh,
And
I like that
I
question.
couldn't think of anything scarier than doing stand-up comedy in New York. And like while this was all kind of happening, I literally was reading a Time Out New York magazine, print, hard copy, early 2000s is 2001, and was on the subway and it hit a bump or something, and so magazine fell to the floor. It opened up and I noticed that there was an ad for a stand-up comedy class at the new school. And so that's when I kind of had the idea, and I was like, that's terrifying. So I enrolled in the class and really learned kind of the history of stand-up. But my family is a funny storytelling family. We're both from Texas, so the stereotype of Texas long
Yeah.
cat tails
And
is
we
not.
don't have big hair.
So my brother and I now have a rule that if we both remember it, we just assume it's real because we don't have anyone to like fact check. But a lot of these stories are probably Texas tales. But anyway, so I'm used to funny and stories, but the stand-up comedy class was really about the structure and timing and a set and what that means. So then I started doing stand-up in New York as part of that class to kind of practice. And then I started doing it more and more and more as it was coming into a presidential election season while I was also working as a college administrator. So it all kind of happened at the same time. So
wow, you were very, very busy during that time. Just the college administrator job alone is extremely time consuming.
and I mean,
Wow.
I do a lot of things multiple. I mean, even the year of COVID, when you're talking about the second edition of the first book,
Yeah.
I released it. I did the audiobook. I also got an MBA, and I was working full time virtually like everybody else was during COVID. I have kind of a big bandwidth, I guess.
Well, it sounds like you have extremely good time management because in order to be successful at even one of those, you need that. Wow, that's awesome. And you made listeners just did make reference to her book, and that's called Good Enough Now. The second edition just came out, so check it out. I'll be putting the links on one of the slides at the end of our podcast. Sure.
Speaking of more than one thing at a time. So the second edition of Good Enough Now came out in 2021. So it's a second edition of the first book. My newest book is called Almost Doing Good, and it's coming out in October. So
I cannot wait for that. Yeah, and thank you so much for sending me the script, not the script. The what's called unpublished.
Copy.
Yeah, thank you. Early copy. So what's it called in the publishing world? Not a script, the copy. There we go. So thank you. I'm excited, and I was very honored. So thank you.
Yeah.
And listeners, just so you know, that book too, Almost Doing Good, doing the best you can with what you have some of the time, that will be released in October. I will be putting the link to that as well, so you can get your on the wait list for your copy to be sent.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So let's go to our first question, Jess. How can leaders effectively recognize DEI challenges before they become larger issues? And what are the warning signs they should look for?
So I loved this question actually when fortunately you gave me the questions in advance and I was like, this is gonna be fantastic. My answer is a little different because that's how I roll, right? And so the best thing I could tell a leader to do and what the warning signs are is that just swallow that you are already missing something. That's really hard, especially because most of us can't recognize a problem that we're not experiencing. And because we're not experiencing it, therefore it does not exist.
Exactly.
Right. Well, that's not true. I am currently in the state of California. I am fairly certain Delaware currently exists, but I don't experience it currently. So I just have to trust the Delaware is still
it's there somewhere.
Right. So we have the skills, but when we start talking about DEI issues, power dynamics, things like that, unless we experience it, we have a very hard time acknowledging that it's real. So the first thing I would say is acknowledge you have missed something. Like present progressive tense, currently sitting in missing something. That's your own work to do. And once you can realize that you're not a terrible, horrible, awful person just because you didn't notice. You just didn't notice. Yeah. Now you've noticed. Golf clap. So then the warning is that now that you've noticed that you're not noticing stuff, there is a whole bunch of other stuff you're still not noticing.
Oh, yeah.
So then the warning is our discomfort of not acknowledging that we are not noticing something is actually at the root of the problem. But most of us are looking for something external that we can like rearrange and then it's fixed. Yeah. But I'm encouraging people to pull it in and really get to terms with the fact that you are likely ill prepared for something going wrong, because something is probably going wrong right now that you're not even recognizing. And then you don't know how to respond versus kind of knee-jerk reaction. You don't know how to respond to the thing you don't recognize because you're ill prepared.
Yeah, and that's so true. Nobody knows everything. Nobody can be in every place all the time at the same time. And so it is important to first self-reflect. So you know your own biases and stuff. But it's also important to bring others to the table that are from different backgrounds and with that hire, diverse individuals for your departments and have a nice array of diversity. And it doesn't always have to be based on race and color. There's a lot other, those are very important though, but there's other aspects that make a workplace diverse: veterans, LGBTQ+, those with visible and invisible disabilities, and the list can go on. But it's also important, at least to me, in my personal experiences, to have sort of like an open door policy. Now, you don't have to be accessible 24/7, but for your teams to know that they can go to you when there's an issue and that they're not going to get reprimanded or there's not going to be any negative consequences. That's very important, because if your teams and the people under you that report to you and the people that report to them and the domino effect going down, if the employees and staff don't feel comfortable enough to go to their supervisor, their director, their vice chancellor, whatever it may be, CEO, CPO, then those people are not going to know unless they're directly exposed to it. And so, I'm right there with you, Jess, on knowing yourself first. So, cool. Well, thank you for that. So in your experience, how do organizations typically respond to DEI failures? And I have to say this, I love that you also talk about your own failures in your books and stuff. So, and even when you're doing workshops and stuff, because it's important. To let others know no one's perfect. We all make mistakes, but it's how we respond to them that is important. So how do organizations typically respond to DEI failures, and what can they do differently to turn those failures into learning opportunities?
Well, that's largely what the newest book, The Almost Doing Good, really focuses on, is that I don't even mean this funny. And when I say this, people are like, oh, Jessica, you're so funny. But I don't know an organization who has done DEI so well that they don't need to do it anymore. I do not know of a single example. So
because it doesn't exist.
Right. So
unlike Delaware,
our failures, air quotes, right, are really attempts. And so what ends up happening is that the attempt didn't work. So then we stop, instead of seeing the attempt as a step in the right direction. So learning from our failures, sharing our failures with other people, and then learning from their failures would be how we would actually disrupt what we're currently doing. It feels really vulnerable. It's really scary. And that's what we're going to need to do in order to do something different. When you were talking earlier, it made me think of one client that I have changed the name so that nobody sues me. But it's really the experience that really led me. I didn't have a choice. I had to write this book. And this particular company is widely regarded as a fantastic place to work. It's very progressive. It wins all these awards for being trans inclusive, neurodiverse inclusive, LGBT inclusive. It's this incredible progressive place to work. And one of their mantras is to bring your whole self to work.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an incident that happened internally, which is how I got called in. Well, it turns out that bring your whole self to work means white, progressive, secular, liberal self.
Mm.
You can come to work. It's fantastic for us up in here, right? But
Yeah.
as I started interviewing people, and they're in 18 different countries, right? So like bring your whole self to work is very different in different countries. But it was, from their point of view, this very inclusive place. They felt wildly included. Do you see how Delaware is being questioned again?
Yes.
So when I started doing interviews with people, folks of color, but specifically Muslim, Jewish, evangelical Christian folks of color, did not feel that they could bring any of their own religious practices, political beliefs, cultural identity to work, even if they were in a country where those identities were in the majority.
Interesting.
Because the company was catering, for lack of better words, through its founders' identities and ideals, this white, secular, progressive, liberal place. But you can't do that and also include people who do not do that.
Yeah.
And so one of the first steps of doing any kind of DEI work I recommend is to fully identify who are you excluding. And that freaks people out, especially very liberal, progressive, self-identified people, because, oh, we're not leaving anyone out. There's not enough chairs for everybody. So who are you intentionally leaving out? So for this company, we started with, how about you are leaving out people who are not employed at this company? Can you just start there? And they're like, oh, I never thought about that. And I was like, you're building a workplace culture for only the people who work in your company. Can we get used to intentionally leaving people out so that we can get comfortable and then actually start locating who we're unconsciously leaving out? If you can't actually get comfortable with who you're consciously leaving out, you're never going to uncover who you're unconsciously excluding. That's one of the biggest mistakes, I think.
That is actually very interesting that you bring that up, because usually it's the total opposite. The other polar side, that is what how DEI came about, actually. And so that's very interesting. But I'm actually curious, was that a B2B or a B2C business?
I'm never good at those.
I'm sorry, what were they doing business with other businesses, or were they developing products to sell or to the community?
Well, I understood the concept. I just have to.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
I'm like, wait, which one is which? So that company developed software that they sold to small business entrepreneurs and possibly like medium-sized businesses. But the small business entrepreneurs would, like, I'm a solopreneur. I don't have employees. I could use the software as much as a small, medium, or large company. But the dynamics that I was talking about was primarily internal with their employees.
Yeah, but I love that you asked them the question, are you excluding people who don't work here? Because in essence, that would be their customers or the businesses they do business with.
Right. Or just strangers on the street, like just practice there. Like, I think we often enter this kind of do-gooding work as if we are addressing every human being in the world, which sounds great and makes much better t-shirts, but it's also really overwhelming.
Yeah.
So then who are you not dealing with? People who don't want to play with you. Okay, great. Start there. Like, we're not dealing with the people who don't opt in.
Yeah.
But now you're able to build up a little bit more tolerance for the fact that you are not solving a problem for every human being, because you don't have the time, capacity, or resources to solve a problem for every human being. Now, spoiler alert, back to selling t-shirts. Doing good ultimately impacts your industry, your surrounding community. Sure, it's eventually going to impact everybody. But right now at this table, trying to decide about this program series, it can become daunting and overwhelming if you're holding everyone. So just be a little bit more realistic so you can actually start and continue to do something.
That's true, because you're never going to please 100% of everybody 100%. I mean, all the time. So that's where compromises in these conversations, and I wouldn't say even say compromises, but trying to, with what you know and who and from all the data that's being collected and stuff, what is the best decision that most people can agree on. So and again, then that's where, like, well, we'll all agree on this, so that's, other things can maybe something, maybe I'm at the table and it's like, well, that wasn't what I wanted, but they did do this and this, that's what I want. So that's where, I might be happy about some of the things that they chose, but maybe not all that excited about some of the other ones, so not everybody's going to be 100% happy all the time, and that's like okay.
Similar language is being used looking at the political candidates.
Yes.
Right. Yes. Is that you don't have to agree with every single thing on every single stance. Could you agree with some of them, most of them, partial things? It's very hard to find someone who stands for everything you stand for, especially when you don't even know everything you stand for.
Exactly. And we don't even know everything they stand for, the politicians that are running. They tell us what they feel is the most important topics that are of concern to people, but it's not their entire platform. So so it's and that's where doing the research and gathering data, not just one-sided, but all sides, is very important. So you can make whether you're a voter or you're a CEO in an organization, and with the board and other leadership in the organization, y'all can make the best decisions with the information that you have collected. But it's also important to reassess regularly, because people come and go in organizations, times change, people change, maybe there were things that we didn't know back then when we first started our initiatives that we now know. And so that reassessing and improving initiatives is very important to do. So again, you're learning from your what you did, your, I wouldn't say mistakes, but you've learned more things 3 years from now that you didn't know today. So so what role does communication, especially at the universities, what role does communication play in navigating challenging DEI situations, and how can leaders create a space for open and honest dialogue, which is very, very important?
I feel like communication and marketing need to have a sit down, right? So one of the first things I do when I work with a client is I ask for multiple years of an annual report that they've like marketed and put out and share with stakeholders, etc. And what's fascinating is the annual reports are almost like a template every year. There's a kind of change in how they look, usually when a new
pictures and things,
the marketing job, but otherwise the material has been greenwashed, pinkwashed. Your folks of color are in the photos, but they're often exactly the same people. So it's very easy to determine how communication is being marketed out. And so then I like to call that out as this is kind of the ganache layer that you're giving to other people. So how do we make this real? Instead of putting lipstick on a pig, how do we actually start communicating what we're actually doing? And a lot of times you have people who don't feel heard and don't feel seen. And this is a great way to start listening and seeing people, is to break out of this kind of pattern of look how amazing and great we are. It's actually just as powerful to show areas of growth, areas of failure, areas of interest, new things that you're trying to do. What we end up doing is kind of marketing our communication, because it tells a better, more positive story. Whereas I really think that there's a lot of power in disrupting that model and telling a real story of the struggles, the hardships. What do we do? How do we get out of that? I think it's really interesting, several years post COVID. I work with, an average of like 60, 70 clients a year. And not a single one of my clients in the last 5 years have shared anything they struggled with when collectively we had a 24-hour period to figure out how to do a global shutdown. That was an easy choice. You just immediately knew what to do. No, none of us knew what to do. I make a joke.
I remember seeing you in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I remember saying
I make a joke that very few of us had immediate access to someone who survived the Spanish flu. Disability advocates have been talking about remote work or hybrid work for decades, and it was never allowed. It was not seen as productive or good use of money. Now there's conversation about, this hybrid work schedule or coming back to the office, but it's connected to real estate values because all these office buildings are empty now. I haven't seen a flood of disclosures of what was hard about that choice. But I feel like socially, we are all prepared for that to have been a hard choice that also kind of evolved as more and more information came. States eventually handled the quote shutdown very differently. Some lasted 2 years, some lasted 2 weeks. What was that like? How did you deal with, if we go to schools, I think it's a good example. I don't have children. I have never been more grateful in my entire life to not have children. All my friends, all of a sudden having to online student or homeschool. People have been homeschooling kids forever.
Yeah, my neighbors across the street have homeschooled their kids.
Right. So
since they were in school age.
Why didn't we can't talk about how that was hard? No, because we don't talk about hard things. We talk about talking about hard things, but we don't actually share and communicate about hard things.
That's very, very true. And as you mentioned the annual reports and at the very beginning of your answer, and every time I think of an annual report and also website content from the marketing teams, I hate stock pictures. I'm sorry, I cannot stand stock pictures on company websites. Why aren't you using your real teams? And make it more real, like the everyday, what people will see if they walk in the building type of stuff. It's all these stock photos of people that don't work there, but they fit the profile of what they want the public to see and possible donors to see, and when it comes to the annual reports and stuff as well. So it just drives me crazy, these stock photos.
It's a good example where somewhere it makes sense because it's efficient. If you start using pictures of your own people, one, you have to sign waivers.
Yeah, which most of them already have on file.
Right, but if somebody quits their job, you got to remember that you have that picture on the website, and then you have to change it out, and that's too much to keep track of. So we'll just use stock photos, so it doesn't matter. But it's inauthentic. Efficient, but inauthentic.
I agree. Yeah, definitely efficient, and because you have your bank of stock photos to choose from, and you can just put a little description in to search, and boom, there you go. But yeah, it's very unauthentic, and I think in today's society, with especially with our younger generations coming, trying to choose universities, but also those graduating and choosing their first professional job after graduation, a lot of them are looking for that diversity, those initiatives, that corporate giving, and so having those authentic pictures and stories, and when an organization is real, talk about the failures and how you bounced back, or what you're doing if you're still trying to bounce back, because whether it's, in the annual reports, that doesn't need to go on the website, but in the annual reports, because that's important for donors and people like that, and board members to see, where is all their hard work going to, where is their money going to, how has it helped, not just this the successes, like you said, but also those challenges.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So, what advice would you give teams and leaders who are afraid of making mistakes, which many of us are, but they're afraid of making mistakes in their DEI efforts, and how can they approach these challenges with more confidence?
You can be confident that you are making mistakes, and so is everyone else.
That is so true. I love that short and to the point answer. That is so true, because everybody makes mistakes, and it's how as we talked about a little bit a while ago, it's what we do with that knowledge. How do we learn from our mistakes? Are you assessing what you did and all, so you can try other methods? You had mentioned in one of your previous answers about learning from your mistakes. It reminded me of that one quote, which I'm gonna botch, from Alexander Graham Bell, when he was not Alexander Graham Bell, who was the one that invented electricity? Not electricity. No, it was Alexander Graham Bell with the no, not Bell, with the light bulb. Was it Bell with the light bulb too? Yeah, okay. Alexander Graham Bell with the light
Unless
bulb.
you're
It's like,
talking about Thomas Edison.
no, Thomas Edison. Thank you, Thomas Edison. I didn't. Um, he found like 10,000 ways that didn't work or something like that. I can't remember the exact quote, but he said, I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work or something like that.
Yeah.
So, and then there's NASA from like the 60s, like failure is not an option, because, and that doesn't mean that, no, you're never going to fail, but it's because life is full of failures. It's how you learn from them and move forward and grow from that experience.
If we can, well, let's stick to NASA for a second. I don't know all the specifics, but there are 2 astronauts currently that
Oh my
are in
gosh,
space.
yes.
They've been in space months longer than they're supposed to,
Like, I think
and they're
8
not gonna
days
be
was
able
our
to
thing.
come back for
Yeah.
like 8 more months, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to use this as an example.
This is a good example, actually.
So somewhere, somebody wrote down on paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna go, I'm exaggerating, but you're gonna go up on Wednesday and we're gonna bring you back down on Sunday.
Yeah.
These people have like lives, families, children, etc. They signed up to be astronauts, so they're gonna go on this short trip. Something happened. I don't know what happened. They're way smarter than me, and they evidently didn't know that that was going to happen, because now it is no longer on the plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now they have a plan of how to fix it, but the plan of how to fix it is a really long time away, and they're communicating, right? Safety first. Well, who wouldn't say safety first? But you know what? I don't understand what's going on. So what does safety in like 8 months delay? I don't understand the connection. I don't need to understand the connection because I'm not an astronaut. Those 2 astronauts, they're aware of the connection. At least that's what we're hearing, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure their families are like, well, there's another birthday that we're going to miss, but all right, safety first, right? So then they're going to do this. There is no guarantee that something isn't going to happen between now and that date, or that date it's going to be successful. They have a high risk job.
Yes, they do.
Right?
Yes,
like, okay, like we just have to be okay with some degree of unknown, while paying attention to a million different things that could go wrong, and being conscious that we probably missed something. Okay. Like, I think that one of the things I talk about in the book is that we need to normalize complexity. We're not trying to Windex off complexity. Complexity is just present. And if we can just get comfortable with, like, yeah, I don't really know, there's a lot going on. If we can get comfortable with that by normalizing it, the ability to disrupt complexity is far more available, because we're actually focusing on, in this case, disrupting workplace culture versus streamlining the workplace culture that exists as if that's going to fix the problem. We're working towards no problem instead of actually disrupting the place where the problems are coming from. We have to normalize the complexity and be okay with the fact that, like, we don't actually know what's going to happen. We don't know.
That's true. We don't. And but all you can do is, like, I wouldn't say go with the flow, but hope that you made a lot of preparations for possible things that could go wrong. or you foresaw possible things that could go wrong. You made plans, like if this happens in this, then if this happens in this, but just move forward and keep assessing and learning and trying to fix things, or not fix things, but improve things. And because humans as a species are complex. We're probably, I wouldn't even say we're the most complex creatures on the planet. There's some pretty interesting creatures on the planet, but we are very complex, and we all come with our different backgrounds or different experiences or different beliefs and biases, and then we're coming together in a classroom, or we're coming together in a workplace and working towards the same goal. And that's where knowing your why in a workplace is very important. The mission and your impact, what your position, how that's impacting the mission and stuff. It's just, you can never foresee 100% of everything that is going to happen, because you can try stuff out and hopefully it'll work. But and I just keep thinking of these astronauts. That was such a good example, because I saw them on the news. I'm kind of digressing a little bit myself, but I saw them on the news last night or yesterday, and they just look so malnourished from what they from when they first came on that craft. And but it's like that's to where they're provisioning their provisioning their meals and everything, so they're making sure that they have enough for as long as it can go. And and that's sort of like what you have to do in organizations too, like look at what corrective actions can take place to fix something as quickly as possible, with making sure that you're not doing something that's one, illegal, and two, that isn't going to offend everybody. So I hope that makes sense.
Well, this is now a tangent, but we need to
stop.
We need to stop worrying. This is a very controversial thing I'm about to say, listeners. We need to stop worrying about not offending someone, because you have no way of knowing what is or isn't going to offend someone.
Exactly.
You just need to take responsibility for what you're saying. Because what you're saying very likely could offend someone, and then you need to know why you said it. Were you trying to offend, or were you not trying to offend? That's an important thing for you to know about, to take responsibility for it.
And that's where, and I agree. And that's why I said 100% of people. And that's where communications in organization, in organization is so important. Having that enough transparency to your teams, letting them know what happened. This is what we're going to do moving forward. We're going to reassess and all, because then if your teams have some kind of knowledge of like why certain things are happening, when like I thought we were doing this, it's like, well, and then or if something happened, a new initiative or a process was implemented and it totally failed, and if the teams and it affected the teams negatively, if the teams never get any communication from their leadership of what they're doing to try to address the situation, because they're concerned about their teams and and their success and their well-being and all, then you're going to have some pretty, pardon my words, listeners, pissed off employees, and it's going to affect your retention. And it could affect your retention for, it doesn't have to be diverse candidates that are negative affected only. It could have affected all the employees. So it's very important for communication to make sure that your organization is actually the communication is being filtered down correctly, appropriately, and in a time appropriate manner. So So, speaking of failures and all, I love this last question because as we were telling listeners, everybody has had failures, and and if someone tells you they never have, then they're probably going to try to sell you beachfront property in Arizona. So, can you share a time when you learned from a DEI related failure and how that experience shaped your approach moving forward?
Yeah, there's almost 30 examples of DEI failures. I have case studies that are in the book, and I showcase the case study and what I'm going to call like the good intentions
Mm.
and how those good intentions caused more harm, or things might have actually been better if you hadn't done it in the first place because it wasn't completely thought out. When I was actually prior to writing the book, when I was talking to a group of my colleagues about these case studies, it was crystal clear to them that they could see the good intentions and they could see what was missed. And
Mm.
it was interesting for me to I'm just using examples. I didn't think it would do anything to the people I was sharing, but I watched them like get it, where the good intentions were and how like that did not work. And
Mm.
because it was somebody else, they could learn. And then I listened to the conversations. Oh yeah, we did something like that too. And it was very powerful for me to witness the power of sharing from failures because it helps people have permission to fail. We a lot of times in the business environment, we talk about the importance of creativity and innovation, but we do not reward attempting something
Mm-hmm.
because we call it a failure.
Yeah.
Well, much like you said with Edison, if I'm trying something, that should be rewarded.
Yeah.
I'm working towards the goal. It just didn't work a bunch of times until it does.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't do that because we don't even admit failure in DEI. Nobody is
Mm-hmm.
doing this well. The vast majority of my clients, I will say this to them, is that you are terrified of being first, but you're overly confident that you're not last. And that's not a place of momentum building.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're stuck because you don't want to be first, but you're pretty sure you're not last. So being able to learn from failures, what I learned was that the failures were the gateway to them actually being able to understand the difference between good intentions and a well-planned response. So then I put them all together because I think that if we can learn from each other's good intentions, what the difference between that and a well-planned, prepared response based on recognizing real power dynamics that need to be disrupted, then we're actually going to be able to make a difference and really begin to actually disrupt workplace culture to be more inclusive, more equitable, create a sense of belonging, create a sense of justice that's not just in our workplace or our teams, but in our industry, our entire surrounding communities, because nobody else has the time and the resources to solve community ails. And when we came up with the idea of conscious capitalism and corporate social responsibility, like that's what we said, but then we turned it into marketing pieces instead of actually doing something.
Ooh, that is so true. That is so true. And when you say corporate social responsibility, it just reminded me of when I mentioned the annual report. And it is all marketing. It's like, this is what we're doing. This is what we've done. And it may just have been 1 or 2 days out of the entire year, that they gave something or volunteered someplace. And just so they can put it in the annual report. And there are organizations that do that. Not everybody does that, but there are organizations that do that. And yeah, so I love that you had said that it gives them it's probably gonna bell. And that's very important because everybody is their worst critic. And when we fail, when we know that we did something and but we tried something and it didn't work. Sometimes organizations aren't they're accepting of that of their employees when that happens. there are those leaders that are still very blame game, and they're still in like tunnel vision. They can't see outside the box, and it's like, oh well, we tried this. What else can you? It didn't. Okay, what didn't work? What in the process of this process didn't work? Let's assess, and let's see how we can improve on things. Because and that gives your teams permission to fail. It gives them permission to try. It gives them permission to try out new ideas, new processes, and not afraid to volunteer those new ideas and processes in team meetings to their leaders and stuff. And for all you know, it could work, and it could be a game changer for that organization's future. And you don't know all the domino effects in the future that something that was tried, maybe failed, tried, improved on, maybe failed again, improved on, maybe failed again, improved on, worked. You don't know all the positive domino effects, and possibly some negative domino effects too, that could happen based off of that one idea. And so, and it all stems down from try something new, step out of the box. It's okay to fail, learn from your failures, keep going.
You're going to be really bad at something you've probably never done before.
Yeah.
You might be mediocre. You could be Olympic level at a thing that you've never tried before, but that's unlikely.
Yeah.
And nobody has ever done this well. So let's fail in the right direction together.
I love that. I fell in the right direction. I love that. And yeah, because it's very important if progress is going to happen. And sometimes progress, thinking of the negative things that happen with progress and assessing situations and organizations, sometimes that does mean someone, letting somebody go. That's one of the negative things that could happen. But if and letting somebody go who is resistant to change, is resistant to new initiatives, and has been put on performance improvement plans before, it's important to follow protocol, give them the opportunity, give them the resources they need to hopefully go in the direction that is needed.
Mm-hmm.
So Jess, let's go to some key takeaways. This has been a great conversation, and I want to be cognizant of your time here. So key takeaways of what Jess and I talked about. We talked about embracing failure as a growth opportunity. Talked a lot about that. And learning from DEI-related failures is crucial to creating more inclusive workplaces. Mistakes offer valuable lessons that drive progress. We talked about recognizing DEI challenges early and developing the ability to spot potential issues before they escalate, helps leaders and teams respond effectively to sensitive situations. We talk about responding with intentionality, and building a response strategy for DEI challenging situations ensures your actions are inclusive, thoughtful, and impactful. We talked about communicating openly and effectively. Creating a culture of open dialogue encourages trust, allowing for constructive feedback and real-time course correction. And we talked about leading with courage and confidence. Leaders who embrace difficult conversations and take responsibility are better equipped to guide their teams through challenging DEI issues, as well as having better employee retention, because if they admit their failures and their struggles, it's that much more positively impactful for the organization. Are there any other key takeaways, Jess, that you can think of that I didn't say?
At the end, I really like let's fail in the right direction together.
Yes.
That was kind of fun.
It was. Cool. All right, let's go into some next steps for our listeners. I always like to leave with a call to action, some resources, and some things that our listeners can do to keep improving themselves. So start reflecting on your failures. So remember, self-reflection is very important. Think about past DEI efforts that didn't go as planned. What can you learn from those experiences, and how can you apply those lessons moving forward? What is it? Fail in the right direction. Build a DEI response plan. Develop a proactive plan for recognizing and addressing DEI challenges within your organization. Foster open conversations. Encourage your team to have ongoing, candid conversations about DEI efforts, creating a safe space for feedback and growth. Again, the safe space is very important for these conversations to happen. If the safe space isn't there, that's something you'll need to work on before you can have these open conversations. And invest in DEI training. Consider bringing in an expert like Jess to guide your team through DEI challenges and help build resistance. Any other next steps you can think of, Jess?
No, the book's available on Amazon, and it'll walk you through step by step how to do those great calls to action that you mentioned. And I'm very excited for all of us to realize that we are almost doing good. And that's not terrible. And by almost doing good, we are doing the best we can with what we have some of the time. So thank you again for having me. This has been a great conversation.
Likewise. One more thing, and listeners, I will be putting the links to Jess's books in the podcast as well as in the summary. If our listeners want to get a hold of you, Jess, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you? What are the different ways they can get a hold of you? If they want to be a speaker,
social media platforms, Jess Pettitt or As Good Enough Now. The websites work. Almostdoinggood.com is a website for the book specifically. And Good Enough Now or Jess Pettitt. Nobody can spell my last name, but they both redirect to my keynote page or consulting services or something. And I'm happy to help. So thank you again.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure having you. Listeners, I will have Jess's contact information on one of the last slides, as well as in the summary of today's podcast. And remember, our episodes drop every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So check out our next episode. In the meantime, keep learning, keep failing forward. I'll see you next time. Stay diversifused. Bye. Want to be a guest speaker on the Get Diversifused podcast? I'm on the lookout for guests, so if you're passionate about DEI and would like to share your unique insights, experiences, or success stories, I want to hear from you. If you're a fellow podcaster who's passionate about DEI, let's swap the mic and amplify each other's voices. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out to me at Andrea@diversifuse.com and I'll send you the link to our guest interest form. Hope to hear from you soon. Remember, stay diversifused. Now go out there and make a difference. And as always, for more strategies on building inclusive workplaces and communities, check out Diversifuse. We're here to guide you on your DEI journey. Make sure to visit our website at diversifuse.com and follow us on social media for the latest happenings, blog posts, tips, and events.